I made this video to ask all of you Magic players one thing. Are you okay?
That's okay, take your time.
There seems to be a bigger divide amongst the casual and the competitive audience, not in terms of just constructed versus commander, but especially on this channel when it comes to Pauper content. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. What has y'all so mad about Pauper? Why does this format succeeding make you upset? And why can't you understand when, the power of a card really will warp the format, and why we honestly should be complaining about it? This just comes from my recent discussions around Cranial Ram, a card here on the screen that does so much to the Pauper format in terms of glitters being already banned, I should say, cranial plating being banned as well, and the card being so similarly templated to both of those cards. And a lot of people will say, okay, you have the glitters ban that is an enchantment, which is a harder permanent to deal with, which doesn't really matter in a format full of removal, but the dice removal argument can also be attributed to Cranial Ram. But that's what's good about it. The fact that Cranial Ram can come down as a separate piece of removal. The format isn't made of board wipes. It's all about single target. So the fact that Cranial Ramming can top deck, come down, and create a body to then take away from the other bodies, and when you kill the body, the artifact still stays around. Unlike all that glitters where when you equip it onto something, it just falls off into their graveyard. And a second argument that folks might be talking about is the fact that the toughness is so big for it. Well, you know why that also doesn't matter? Because a lot of the removal that is in Pauper isn't necessarily, damage based. A lot of it is just hard removal, especially when it comes to black. If you're playing red and, stuff like that, then, in black, there is some -1/-1 stuff, but in red, that is the damage base. In white, you have Journey to Nowhere and stuff. So the toughness doesn't really matter there. It's really about the offensive. And yes, it doesn't have the instant speed equip that Cranial Plating does. It doesn't have the colorless stuff, but all that doesn't matter because it's still 2 mana. And it can come down and equip, create its own body. It's an artifact to count itself in the affinity matchup. There's so many things wrong with this card, and I think it's absolutely busted. But what y'all did not think was that the card is good. Go, you know what? Go to my videos right now. For those of you who don't believe me, go to my recent video on Cranial Ram, go to my recent TikTok short on Cranial Ram, and look at the amount of people in those comment sections that are just telling me that I'm overhyping it, that I'm just blowing it out of oblivion, that we need to, watch what the card does. I mean, look at this tweet from Gavin Verhey. He himself is saying this card needs to be put on a leash, that we need to monitor this card. And so many people are in the comments talking about, why did we even print this then? If it's on a leash, why even bother? Let's just print it as an uncommon. It'd be perfectly fine. If it was an uncommon, this wouldn't affect many people's minds at all. They would literally just be playing Cranial Plating because mana is more perfect and it's better to be casting colorless things. And so Cranial Plating is just better in that sense because the instant speed equip is more relevant in those formats. Whereas here, in a format that's a little bit slower and you can develop your mana a bit more, the instant speed equip doesn't really matter. You want the body, right? On the fact that, and of course, plating isn't legal. So it's just the whole thing there. But regardless, there's a lot of people here that don't understand why that's important. Gavin Verhey tweeting this out is so relevant because he understands that this is broken. He brought this up in the banned and restricted announcement recently about a card that would likely need to be banned, and this is it. This is it. With the announcement that all that glitters is banned out of the format and plating already being banned. I keep saying bland, but being banned out of the format. It's so relevant that a card like this is being allowed to be printed. And I will give the Pauper format panel and Gavin Verhey themselves credit here in the sense that they want cards like this to be designed and explore the space. I will also note that the Pauper format panel, to my knowledge, doesn't actually design cards. They're not aware of cards in advance. So I will note that, and I believe that has been stated, but they do provide advice on the format. They do consult. And so based on current metagame findings, based on people's opinions, and just things that will develop as these tourneys go on, they will then decide and kind of consult to the fact that it likely needs to be banned. But then the problem is the fact that so many of y'all don't agree. If the creator of the card, the person that said is likely going to be banned, why would you disagree? I don't understand. Like, you're not a game designer. You're just someone behind a computer screen. And honestly, that's me too. As a creator, I'm just a loudmouth brown boy that just shouts at the internet about Magic cards. But I like to think I have more experience than the average person in my YouTube comments talking to me about why Cranial Ram doesn't need to be banned. And for many of you, you're just spouting some nonsense. I mean, look at this tweet right here talking about how, the Pauper format is this, the Pauper format is that. Like y'all aren't even playing a competitive format. Like, I think you know, just there is, and I will credit to the fact that a lot of folks have kind of pointed this out to me, which is why I wanted to make this video. There is such a big divide between the competitive players that play Pauper and the casual players that play Pauper, where there is a big audience that plays the format because it's accessible, it's cheap, and it's very high power and interactive. And a lot of people don't understand that. You have cards like Dark Ritual, Lightning Bolt, and Lotus Petal, like all these powerful cards that are common. The artifact lands, everything that we've been screaming about is common as well. And so we have powerful interactions that exist in the format. It's really just the payoffs that tend to be a little bit more filtered, right? So you're playing Affinity and you're playing Galvanic Blast in Murn Enforcer. That's really about it. You're not playing anything super crazy busted that's coming out, right? Like you do still have some crazy big counterspells like Counterspell itself, Spell Pierce, and all that stuff, but you don't have like anything busted like Teferi. You don't have the Planeswalkers and whatnot. Now we do have common legends that are being explored as a new option for the format, but that doesn't mean that there isn't anything powerful happening in the format. It's very interactive. The removal is there. You have very big plays like Ponza, Initiative, you have Burn, you have counterspells, you have combo decks out the wazoo. There's powerful things happening in the format, but for some reason players don't acknowledge this. And I think it's because Wizards of the Coast has done a pretty poor job of marketing this format. Not only is it an official format supported by Wizards of the Coast, especially with the Pauper format panel and Gavin Verhey being a front-facing kind of engine for this format to succeed, but there hasn't been like a big pro tour, a big RC or anything like that. There's like creator events, there's online tournaments, but there isn't that kind of front-facing paper support for this. A lot of folks talk about how they have very big local support for that. They have local communities that play Pauper. I personally don't in the Toronto scene, which is crazy. As a big scene, there used to be face-to-face games that played Pauper. I believe it was Wednesday nights, and I was an active enjoyer of it. I would go every single week to play it. I'd run out my Affinity deck and I'd meme on people. That's what I enjoy doing. But that doesn't happen anymore. And I think Europe has a big Pauper scene as well. But again, this is through grassroots effort, through other events such as Paupergeddon and everything, organized by external TOs, not by necessarily the big shops or by Wizards of the Coast. And it's supported by them, but it's not run by them. And I think that's the big difference here. A lot of people don't understand that the format is powerful. They don't know what's going on in it. And they think just because it's a bunch of comments that nothing can happen. They're used to the draft chaff that they're getting. They're used to the Colossal Dreadmaw memes. But we're past Colossal Dreadmaw. We want to be taken seriously. Pauper is a serious format, and I've made plenty of skits out there where, of course, I've drawn the perfect hands for them where Pauper decks can beat standard decks, modern decks, and just more powerful formats if they're not ready for it. Of course, the interaction exists and things can happen and these decks can be beat, but they really can, especially Pauper Mono Red. If you build it not for a Pauper metagame, but for a kind of modern metagame or a Pioneer metagame, Pauper Burn can really run away with games, and Pauper Dimir Control is honestly a really good deck in terms of the counter spells that it plays, the removal it plays. It could definitely compete with decks in Pioneer, heck, decks in Modern, definitely decks in Standard. There's so many good options that exist in the format that are powerful, and people just don't know about it because they don't want to play it. They, again, have that stigma that it is a format full of commons. It's so cheap. How could these decks even be playable? It's a bunch of casuals. How could this format even be good in any way, shape, or form? But it is curated. It has the Pauper format panel behind it. It is one of the most well-supported and well-looked-after formats outside of Commander. Heck, Standard doesn't even matter that much, but although Standard is definitely going to be probably, you know, out of the top 4, top 5 formats, definitely going to be like 3 or 4, but I would say out of the most supported formats out there, honestly, it's got to be like Commander, then Pauper, then probably like Standard Modern, and then just going on from there. Because into, you know, Standard Modern, especially just because of the Modern Horizon sets, in terms of Arena for Standard, Pioneer just having the most recency bias as well, is probably in the top 5. But Commander obviously being the most played format in Magic the Gathering, and Pauper just having the Pauper format panel, having cards specifically printed around it. A lot of folks kind of looking to have downshifts happen, and I imagine Gavin Verhey and the rest of the Pauper format panel are looking at these options, and they look at sets like Modern Horizons, like Commander Masters, to print these cards into it. And it's really relevant, right? These are discussions that happen in terms of high level to curate cards to enter this format. We don't really have that for any other format. We don't have this type of roundtable discussion to have cards enter, to curate cards, to manage the ban list, to have these long form articles where a lot of these people throw their passions into it and really understand what's going on from a deep interactive level. This doesn't really happen for any other format out there. And I think that's what's sad about it. I think that's what has a lot of people confused. And honestly, I'm frustrated. I'm mad at all of y'all Pauper haters. You honestly don't know what you're talking about. You suck as a Magic player. I'm going to be straight up. You can quote this right now. Let me know in the comment section down below if you agree. If you hate Pauper, you suck. That's it. You're a crappy Magic player and you need to do better. Honestly, you do. You can prefer not to play the format. You can do that. That's fine. Not every format's for everyone. But if you genuinely hate it and you meme on it and you think it's a dumb format, you're dumb. You suck as a Magic player. And I will stand by this. If you genuinely think Pauper is not a good format, you suck. On average, it is probably net better than the format you're playing. Honestly, most of the time, there's so many times where I'd rather be playing Pauper than Modern. There's so many times where rather be playing Pauper than Commander, right? Because of the Commander rule zero politics, people just banning double sleeving. And then you have Modern where sometimes you just get memed out by triple archive trap, that mill guy. I can imagine there being a lot of frustrations in these formats, and Pauper has these type of interactions as well, but not really. A lot of Pauper games are highly interactive. There's a lot of back and forth. Of course, there's some of the crazy draws, but that exists in every format. The format is very hyper competitive, highly just kind of choice rewarding the decisions you make. Again, I can't scream the relevance of Pauper anymore, but I think a lot of folks just forget the fact that the format is good. It's really good. You need to stop hating on it. And I just really don't understand where all this hate is coming from. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What do you think is the problem that people have with the Pauper format? Do you think I'm right? Is there a point that I'm missing? Do you think I'm off base? Or do you think that I suck for telling other Magic players they suck for hating Pauper? I don't know. Let me know if I'm off base. But honestly, Pauper is one of the top 3 formats that Magic has to offer.